You are here today with PMW. We're doing 1v1. I'm your host, Zuri Uso, and today we have a very special guest, my brother, Jermaine Holland. Listen, Jermaine is an amazing artist, prophet, musician. Listen, I'm gonna allow him to introduce himself to you, but I want you to know that he is one of the people that I hold near and dear to my heart. And so it's amazing to have him here today. Jermaine, how you feeling, brother?
I'm great. I can't complain. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So introduce yourself to us, man. Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Jermaine Holland. I'm all things purpose. I'm a purpose finder. So I try to push people in that as well as myself. I'm a musician, a psalmist, an author, a father, a friend, whatever the Lord sees fit at the time.
That's good. You hear that? Whatever the Lord sees fit at the time. That's a smart man. So Jermaine, we're doing this 1v1 series and we're super excited to get into it. 1v1, clearly for people that don't know, is this one-on-one series where the PMW directors, because Jermaine is an official PMW director.
Let's go.
He's a part of the team. And we're doing this interview series where we're just getting to know these people, but as well as getting to the series about me versus me. And so we're identifying the us within versus the us on the outside. And so before we get to that, I wanted people to get to know you a little bit, Jermaine, just to know a little bit about you personally.
Okay.
So if there was one thing, I guess, that you wanted the viewer to know, what would it be? What would you want people to kind of extract from who Jermaine Holland is?
I'm a loving person. I love everyone. They say I have no filter. So it's just like, just straight
You're a straight shooter.
Yeah, straight
so when
shooter.
you say no filter, how much of a no filter are we talking?
I mean, there's no filter. It's just
Listen, I appreciate the honesty. I can see some people bracing these stuff like, oh my. But honestly, I think it's very real for you to say that and transparent for you to say that. Because a lot of us struggle with filter, if we really tell the truth. It's that me versus me, what I would say to you, but what I'm going to say to you.
Right, yeah, see, that's my struggle. As I'm growing, I'm learning though,
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Even in conversation, how do you manage or how do you navigate in that moment where you don't have a filter, but you obviously have to use one?
Yeah, I do, and it's just my purpose at that moment. And I know I'm supposed to be speaking for the Lord. It's like he brings me under subjection. Outside of that, we have an issue.
So I think that's really good to think about, because I think people don't think about outside of the Lord, right? They don't examine you as that person. They just think, oh, he's in this context, right? So if I'm a musician at church, I'm gonna deal with you like this. And you can't deal with me like this because you're within the confines of church.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people say, the police all the time, you take that badge off, it'd be a different story.
Absolutely.
In church, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that people have to honor the fact that you're still very much human.
Absolutely.
And I think within this me versus me series, that's what we really want to get into.
So
there's a few topics that we're going to talk about throughout this series, and it's going to be really, really good. I'm going to list off a couple of them to you, Jermaine, and you tell me which one pops out at you, which one you think is the one for you. So first one is desire versus God's desire for me. Faith versus fear. Heart versus head. Making up your mind, plan A versus plan B, perception versus reality. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to say heart versus mind. Yeah, for sure. It's probably the one that sticks out to me the most.
So what do you think about, real quick? We're not gonna dive too deep into it because we want you to make sure that you're watching these episodes when they drop. But if you thought or you would open up that topic, what's the first thing you would think about?
Man, motive, intent versus what you think. Motive and intent versus what you think it may be. Perception-wise, it's kind of like you based off of your perception of what's being said or what's being done. You could absolutely have a different thought or a motive and intent of how you're going to respond.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's good. So I think, motive and intent is something that we don't examine all the time.
Right.
And a lot of people do a lot of things, but when we really start to dig into why they're doing it, you start to uncover some reasons that you probably wouldn't even suspect naturally.
Absolutely.
And so that's even a really good thing to examine internally. You know what I mean? Because why do we do the things that we do?
Exactly.
One of the questions we kind of talk about in our last PMW live conversation, if you caught it, was, why do we go to church? Are we addicted to church, or do we have a relationship?
Oh, wow.
Jermaine, you had some powerful stuff to say on that conversation, brother, man.
Wow.
if you could just recap from what you thought about that, what was the one thing you walked away with?
Me being a recipient of church hurt, a lot of ways, I felt like what the Holy Spirit actually like rested on me in that moment was just understanding the systems versus like kingdom expansion. That really just, it blessed me afterwards. It's the kind of like, man, like, we can get into the systems of church, and every now and then the systems may be off.
Yeah.
But if I understand what my purpose is as it pertains to helping the kingdom expand, then it takes the focus off of what's not right.
Wow.
And it puts the focus on what I can do to help.
Right.
And I think that's where we all should be.
Yeah. Because I think one of the things people forget all the time is the church. We say now, and I think everybody's hip to this now, is that the church is a business, right? We say that all the time. Yeah. But we also forget that the church is a community.
Yeah,
and it needs your help. It needs volunteers. It needs people to run smoothly. And so we got to bring something in. We can't always be taken.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So, man, wow.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, in this Me versus Me series, what is one thing you want people to walk away with?
that I've learned that being a PK, you get put under the microscope, but I think the best way to be effective is to understand your humanity, but then tap into your spirituality.
Wow.
Like that's what Jesus did. Right?
Wow.
He was very human, but he was very, very spiritual.
That's good. Expand on that for me. So, like you said, being a PK. So you grew up in church, your family?
Oh, bro, I might have been born in the church. Like, I don't know if my mom actually went to the hospital.
So you grew up in the church. So we talking like 3 services on Sunday.
Oh, bro, yeah. I mean, yeah. In the beginning, it's 3 services on Sunday, and I was anointed minister of music at 10. So it's like I had no choice. Like,
wow. So what is that like?
Man, just your parents telling your parents they singing the wrong note. Your uncle, it's like, how do you do that? It's just like, I mean, you just take whatever you can. You get what you can. But it was cool. It made me better.
It made you better. It made you better. And I imagine as a musician going through those kind of things and dealing with that at a young age, you gotta be on point. Like,
you have to. And my dad thought he was Joe Jackson.
Oh man.
So it was. Yo, get that right. Make sure it's right. But it's like I couldn't really dish it back because I was 10.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like, So it actually really taught me a lot about being a leader because they expect a lot out of you. Right. But they don't really want the accountability kind of bouncing back on them. And so you learn how to have that grace, do what they want to do, but at the same time, you can really help them, usher them in with grace and love, and make them better as well. So
yeah, man, that's a really like Christ-like perception on it. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of us, we don't want to really deal with accountability, but we want the reward, right?
Oh,
what God is going to give us if we do.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's the me versus me examination, is that we have to examine a level of self-accountability.
Absolutely.
So even at that age, for you to be learning that, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was tough.
Wow. So for you, I guess growing up in church at this point, looking back on where you were then up until now, how have you grown when you look at it internally on a me versus basis?
It went from doing what I had to do because I was forced to do it. Like it was one of those things you kind of born into, and then now it's more of I want to do this.
Wow.
Okay. It's like, wow, I'm appreciative to be a part of this. Like he chose me to be something.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I'm honored now. I'm not being made to do it. It's like, wow. It takes a different spin on it, a different responsibility. Absolutely.
Wow, that's good. A lot of kids grow up in church, man, and many of us are there not because we want to be there. I don't know of any kid that goes to church just because they want to go.
Right.
Necessarily at the beginning, you're just kind of there because your parents are, your parents are there and you're there. And so building a relationship or even that internal desire to want to go to church for yourself is a journey within itself, man. Yeah, and so, as a kid that grew up in church, what did that look like for you, man?
Yeah, it was, as a kid growing up for church, I had to be there with a lot of responsibility. It was like, it was no choice. Wow. It was almost like you get up, you go to school. Right. You come back home, you do your homework. Right. Make sure you do your chores. Then you go to church and you do your chores there. Yeah. Whatever that looks like in that moment.
Wow.
That's picking up fans.
Church chores.
Oh, what? You know what I mean? After church, when everybody else left and they left their paper, their fans and things, we got to help clean up. You know what I mean? Church. The deacon might not want to clean that day. You feel what I'm saying? Guess who's deacon?
Listen. You. There you go.
Guess who's usher when they go? everything.
So did you grow up in a small church or is it a large church? How many people we talking?
It was relatively small. We had spurts. Your church grows, and so during the winter time, ain't nobody got nothing to do. It's cold outside, so you might have 50 to 75.
Right.
And then in the summertime, it was about 30. You know what I mean? 30, 35, 40 every now and then. You know what I mean? So it was relatively small compared to the ministries I've been part of.
Wow.
So
That's amazing, man. So you have a huge perspective. So I can't wait to get to this perspective versus reality topic with you.
It's gonna be fun
because you got a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I think a lot of times, people speak on the church so prematurely. Mm-hmm. They speak on the church without a real depth of experience all the time.
Absolutely.
And so for somebody like you that has had ups and downs with the church culture and the experience, where do you fit on that kind of totem pole? How do you look at it?
I'm dead smack in the middle.
Really?
It's like I understand you absolutely need church, and if you look at other religions, they have great discipline, they have great practices, and all of that does is allow you to have balance and understand the relationship you have with God or whoever they're serving in the moment. But for us, it's God for sure. And I think it just gives you balance. I'm in the middle. It's like you need it, but don't oversaturate. You know what I mean? Understand your purpose in it, because otherwise it's null and void.
Wow, that's so good, man. That's really good. I think a lot of people forget balance, man. And even in the me versus me, I think it's two polar opposites that are clashing, right? And the ultimate idea is to get people to understand that balance is necessary and it's fundamental to your faith. Absolutely. It's fundamental to a healthy lifestyle, but ultimately to be able to progress and develop in the way that you want to.
Absolutely.
Because I think you find that if you cover in one thing really, really good, there's probably a few others that you're not covering as good.
Absolutely.
And that's a tough process to understand, especially within our church culture, man.
And it's ever growing. I think sometimes we feel like we get to a certain title or we get to a certain place and it's just like, oh, we've arrived. And it's like, that's not how God really works. Right. As soon as you think you got it, he's like, come a little closer.
Bring it
a little closer.
Wow.
You got something else. So,
that's good. That's good, man.
For sure.
So, obviously with PMW, we're a Prophetic Movement Workshop, but we've started this Prophetic Movement Society. And so there are people that are watching this that are part of the society that want the depth. I mean, they want the deep stuff. They want something that's going to hold them, sit in their stomach. So on a me versus me basis, what do you have for those kind of people that are really looking for something heavy?
Let me tell you something. If you really deal with the things that you don't want to deal with, go back to some of those things you just want to forget in your life, and then realize that's where your purpose lies. And the enemy's only going to touch your perception in those areas.
Wow.
So you want to be mad about your abuse. You want to be upset about your parents not raising you the way they're supposed to. But that's absolutely where your purpose is.
Wow.
So the enemy's going to touch your perception there and make it seem like it's negative. But God, what the enemy meant for evil, God always works out for the good.
Man, that's good. That's good, man. That's so good. So here's what I want to leave y'all with, man, because I'm always a big advocate for application, man, and I think Jermaine said so much right there. And so for this Me versus Me series, we're reading James 1:2-7, and it talks about trials and temptations, right? And so I think that's the me versus me in a nutshell, because there are trials and temptations that we all face. And so ultimately, I think that we have to be willing to self-examine those things.
Absolutely.
So in 30 seconds, wrapping up, Jermaine, what do you think about when you hear trials versus temptations?
Well, I automatically think that you're going to have those with or without God.
Wow.
And I think when we absolutely tap into God, it changes our response to things. I think when we respond like God, like little gods, then the outcome is very different. So you're going to have trials and temptations, and you're going to have those things, but also work with patience.
Wow.
So you're gonna be perfected in those things.
Wow.
So take it in the process and be refined.
Listen, we're leaving you with that. If you enjoyed this, man, Jermaine is coming back again for another episode of Me versus Me, and we got a lot of great topics to talk about with this brother. Man, it's a blessing to have you here, bro.
Yes, sir.
Man, this is PMW. We out.